morning's message is entitled A Time of Great Temptation. A time of great temptation. Lent does not begin in a sanctuary. It begins in a wilderness. It begins not with applause, but with testing. Not with certainty, but with vulnerability. There's probably no better way to begin our 40-day journey to Easter than in a wilderness facing the alluring pull of evil. Because like Jesus, we are facing a time of great temptation. Here in Matthew chapter 4, Jesus is tempted by Satan. Satan tells him, turn these stones to bread. In other words, use your power for personal advantage. Throw yourself from the pinnacle of the temple, forcing God to prove God's protection. Or in a transaction, if you vow to me, you will receive the kingdoms. You will gain the kingdoms of the world. Just capitulate. Accept the world as it is. Don't try to change it, and I will reward you. Each time Jesus responds to Satan by saying, it is written, and after the third temptation, Satan departs. But it's interesting, something happens in verse 11. It tells us that the angels came to minister to Jesus. This is not an obscure reference. It's more than because he was hungry. Why did the angels come to Jesus in verse 11? Because I think these 40 days of fasting and testing, it took a toll on Jesus. Matthew is pointing, he is signaling to us that there is a spiritual dimension to temptation. If you're going to understand this time of great temptation that we are facing in this particular moment, you must see the relationship between the material and the spiritual. These temptations are not merely about bread, safety, and success. They're about trust, allegiance, and who will define reality for us. Like Paul told the Ephesians, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers. What these texts are doing is they are naming, they are revealing the deeper spiritual dimension behind our daily struggles. New Testament scholar E.M. Eugene Boring talked about this theme in Matthew's gospel, that Matthew wants his readers to understand that conflict with Satan is an underlying aspect of the conflict between God's kingdom and the kingdoms of the world. In other words, what looks like a struggle over material or social or political matters is actually a deeper struggle with good and evil. And this is why, as you continue reading in Matthew, Jesus is going to warn his disciples about temptation. In the model prayer, we read these words, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. He's instructing his disciples to attend to not individual temptation, but to attend to the ways in which this world is going to tempt us. In chapter 26, he will warn his disciples as he is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. He says, pray that you enter not into temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the flesh, it is weak. When Jesus offers his priestly prayer to his disciples in John chapter 17, he prays to God saying, God, I pray not that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. Jesus is teaching us to pray, even himself fervently praying for us, because he knew we would face times of real temptation. And what is clear in this text here in Matthew is that there is a real vulnerability with us, that we must acknowledge that the pull of evil is strong. And so a part of our Lenten journey is to face, to grapple with, to struggle with the allure and the pull of evil enveloping us in this moment. We are living in a time of great temptation, and we face unique temptations. Give me a moment to explain what I mean by this. You see, temptations are common to all people in every age. It's just a part of the human experience. But there are unique temptations that come with living in the most powerful nation on earth, especially in this moment of significant change and social collapse. The temptations we face as citizens of an empire like the United States have a unique pull. American evils have a unique, contextual, complex dimensions that I'm trying to help us to see in this month's series. This is why I've been spending all month inviting us to discern the times in which we are living. Because in the same way Jesus faced his temptations, we are facing our temptations. We're facing the temptation to trade conviction for comfort. This is the promise of bread, the exchange, the costly exchange of obedience for ease, safety, and security. There is the temptation to turn trust into testing, the temptation when we place ourselves in the center and make God respond to us rather than trusting in his ways that exceed ours. So many often think, well, if God is really with me, if God is real, then God must act on my own terms, putting God to the test. But it is the third temptation, the temptation to bow, that I want to linger just a few moments. Because it's so interesting to look at the language of the text. Satan is tempting Jesus, offering some sort of transaction. Look at what I can give you if you bow to me. What this is getting at is the temptation to gain power, security, influence by aligning ourselves with evil. And I'm not sure we always take this temptation seriously, because we always put ourselves in very favorable positions when we explore text. We are always the heroes. We're always the ones who will be like Jesus, standing up saying no. Or we naively assume, well, if Satan came to me and offered me all the world, I would do the exact same thing. I would say, absolutely not. I'm not going to bow and worship you. But what if evil rarely announces itself as evil? What if it clothes itself in political, social, racial, class, gender, or economic garments? What if it comes wrapped in policy language, patriotic rhetoric, Christian vocabulary, or promises of safety and prosperity? When temptation looks like this, becomes respectable. In my recent article in Baptist News Global called Easy to Bow, I talked about the tradition of apocalypticism in the Bible. One of the most popular stories in the Old Testament, you know, the story of the Hebrew boys. King says, when the music is played, you all will bow down and worship. And of course, the Hebrew boys did not bow. And they had to face the king and eventually found themselves in the furnace. We love celebrating the faith of these young children. We love celebrating their courage to stand up and to face a sovereign and to say the God that we serve is able to deliver. But even if God doesn't, we won't do it. We like to think we're those Hebrew children. But what about all the others that bowed? You see, the Hebrew boys weren't the only people there before the king. There were masses of people, and all of them bowed. And I'm sure they all had good reasons. And I'm sure a bunch of them that bowed didn't think that highly of the king, but they weren't willing to really lay it on the line. In Revelation chapter 13, when John sees a vision and he sees so many people worshiping the dragon and the beast, seeing people willingly worship evil, not under compulsion, but attraction. Because I don't think we're being honest about our tendency to compromise. The Bible has always known that most bow. And even if you study early Christian history, you will see that when Christians were often brought before the emperor, brought before magistrates, when they had to lay it on the line, are you a Christian? It created what we call the Donatist controversy, because some Christians would say, no, I'm not. They would renounce Jesus under that kind of pressure. And so early Christian leaders are trying to figure out, what do you do with their baptism? How do we figure that out? What I wrote in the article is not an opinion. It's a contemporary expression of the same dynamics Jesus confronts in the wilderness. In daily life, the devil rarely stands before us in a red cape saying, bow. Instead, the invitation comes clothed in respectability, political agendas, cultural assumptions, economic incentives, social pressures, even religious claims of Christ. But they are nothing more than accommodations to the powers of this age. And the truth is, most people, most of us, bow without ever naming it as temptation. And Jesus' wilderness moment here in Matthew chapter 4 is a warning to us. Temptation can seem respectable, socially acceptable, even safe. But in the end, it is nothing more than capitulating to evil. In the times in which we live, temptations are manifold, but the temptation to bow is strong. The temptation, the pull to fit in with, to go along with a society that's in rebellion against God. That pull is strong. And we love thinking that we're the ones always standing. But I think a part of our Lenten journey is going to be grappling with the ways in which not just maybe others have bowed, but I think we're going to grapple with some of the ways that we have bowed. Because if we're being honest, it's easy to get caught up in forces that are rushing us all to the cliff. We're in a historical moment where people would rather see the country burn down than to share it with others. We're in this moment where these forces of evil are at work, and they are affecting us in different ways. And it's easy to think that it's only impacting others. But you'll notice in each temptation, Jesus faces it by drawing on the resources of the Spirit. He says, each time it is written. In other words, he was drawing on a divine point of orientation that was helping him navigate the temptation. And this is what the gospel offers to us, my brothers and my sisters. This is why Jesus taught us to pray in the manner in which he prayed. And this is why Jesus prayed for us, because he knew we would face these moments of temptation. What are the gifts of the gospel that we are going to use in this Lenten journey? It's prayer. And I'm not talking about the Santa Claus prayers that we often pray, where we just say, God, will you give me this and give me that and give me this and give me that? Or the perfunctory prayers that we offer when we like to feel deeply religious. Loving God, Holy One, we bless you, when we're trying to impress ourselves or God. But when Jesus told his disciples, when he taught them to pray this model prayer, he is helping them to understand that there is a dimension of prayer that requires spiritual work. That some of what we do in prayer is not just telling God what we want, not just the intercessory praying for others, but it's also spending some time communing with the Holy One, being honest about where we are and what's happening around us, how it's affecting us. What are you seeing in yourself? How are you changing? I encourage each and every one of you, if you don't have one, to buy yourself an empty journal for Lent. And I want you to get in the discipline of at least once a week. It would be great if you could do it every day, every other day, but let's just start with the week. Find some time to sit with God and to maybe do what David said in one of the Psalms, where David prays, "Search me, O God, and know my thoughts. Try me. What do you see, God, in me?" And spend some time journaling. The gospel also gives us the gift of discernment, that we do have the voice of the Spirit within, the voice of the Spirit at work around us. Preaching moments like this that help calibrate and help you navigate the challenges we face. This is the kind of spiritual work that is before us as we prayerfully move to Easter. And I tell you, America could use churches. America could use more Christians taking a Lenten journey like this. Because the model prayer is that we would not be led into temptation, and that God would deliver us from evil. That is my prayer for this country. I pray that God could deliver us, because evil is all around. But I believe that God is able to deliver us, and the path to deliverance starts with some of the hard work, by facing the ways we have capitulated, facing the ways we have bowed, facing the ways we have benefited, facing the many times we chose to look away or to just say, well, this is just how it is. And that is the problem. how it is. That's why God sent his son. So I want to challenge you today. I want to challenge everyone in the sanctuary and all those viewing online across the country. I want to challenge us all to get up off of our knees, to stop bowing to what is killing us. Though the temptation to bow is powerful, it offers safety, success, belonging. Folks in your group, they're all doing it. Still doesn't mean it's right. Because every time we bow, there's a cost. Every time we bow, we lose something. And Jesus tried to warn us about this. He says, what would it profit a person if they gain the whole world and you lose your soul? Because each time you bow, you lose something of yourself. Until you almost don't recognize who you are. Look at this country. It's almost hard to recognize what we have become. Because we bowed over and over and over again. And so our Lenten journey, we're going to struggle and fast and pray. And we're going to do some confession. We're going to confess our stuff. We are going to ask God for divine help. Because when Jesus said no and Satan left, God sent assistance. We have resources, y'all. We have help. God is with us. And I know it looks impossible. I know it looks hard to say no to the allure of the world, to the power of the world, to say no when that transaction can benefit you, but it's going to cost someone else. Just say no to it. Because as soon as you do, you're going to be surprised the ways in which God's going to show up and send you help. You don't have to bow. Everything you need, you get with the kingdom. I'm getting ready to take my seat, but Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of heaven and its righteousness, and all these, what? Things. The things that evil will tell you to sell your soul for. God says, I'll find a way to give them to you. If you only serve, only worship me, God first. Because doing that is not going to cost your sisters and brothers their very lives. For Jesus has come so that everyone can have life to the full. And so, God, as we face this time of great temptation, give us the courage to look in, to look up, to look around, and to begin this path that's not only going to transform our personal lives, it's going to transform our families, our communities, our churches. I'm excited to see what God is going to do as we walk this journey together. And let the people of God say, Amen.